Best Organized Play, which was a new category that we had this year. We've actually had it on the books for a little while now, but we've never had enough submissions. We really usually need at least 10 in a category to consider it full enough to judge against it. This year we did have enough, and the silver went to End of the Line by Michael Manza, sorry. And gold went to Lost Tales of Myth Draenor by the D&D Adventurers League. Best Podcast, silver went to Fear of a Black Dragon, and gold went to Miskatonic University Podcast. Best Production Values, silver went to Star Trek Adventures, the Collector's Edition Core Rulebook, Modiphius Entertainment. Gold went to Delta Green, the RPG by Arc Dream Publishing. Delta Green had a really strong showing this year in our award show.
A well-deserved showing.
Oh, good. Yeah, I have not had a chance to review it yet. What did you think?
So, I mean, Delta Green is, harken back to a late 90s sort of game setting, and really some great talent involved in that product as far as, Dennis Detweiler and Kenneth Haidt and the team at Chaosium, and really just gave us something that brings, Delta Green, that old setting, into modern game. But still holds true to all the things that made Delta Green great when it originally came out.
That's awesome. Great. I'm going to be checking that out soon now that the awards show season has dwindled down for me a bit. For Best RPG-related product, the silver went to the Dresden Files cooperative card game by Evil Hat Productions, and gold went to Con of Cons by Chaosium. Again, it's a little card game, a lot of fun. You play jungle animals. What did you think?
So Con of Cons, you're stealing cows, and stealing cows, whoever steals the most is the winner, because you have the most cows, you survive the longest. And so it's a little bit of a cutthroat game, but it's also very friendly, very family friendly, and a lot of shouting. The cards all have onomatopoeic names, so it's like waha and things like that, and so you get really into it for a very simple game that involves a lot of card counting, but the theme was great, and it really is a lot of fun.
Best Rules, the silver went to Star Trek Adventures, the Core Rulebook by Modiphius Entertainment. Gold, again, went to Delta Green, the RPG by Arc Dream Publishing. Setting, silver went to Frostbitten and Mutilated, Lamentations of Flame Princess, and gold went to Harlem Unbound by Darker Hue Studios. Best Supplement, silver went to Shadowrun, Dark Terrors by Catalyst Game Labs, and silver went to Reign of Terror by Chaosium. That one I was very pleased for. Mark Morrison was the lead writer on that. He is also a member, one of the partners at Campaign Coins. They are one of our sponsors, and so it was very nice to see him get recognized in a different field that he also is involved in. Mm-hmm. For Best Website, the silver went to Elven Tower, and gold went to the Blades in the Dark SRD. Blades in the Dark, this was the only award that they actually won. They were nominated in several categories, and I know it was one of the fan favorites that just didn't quite make the top 2 in the categories. What was your thoughts on Blades in the Dark?
I really enjoyed Blades in the Dark just from a perspective of it fills a niche in the game that, in the hobby, that we don't have in any other game. So. If you think about, every kind of roguish city infiltration book that you've ever read, Lies of Locke Lamora, things of that nature, Blades in the Dark takes that novelization and turns it into a playable game that really keeps the power to run the game in the hands of the players and challenges your GMs to just run the entire city in reaction to what the players are doing. And it does it in a really unique way that can go, however the players want to go. And so it really ends up being a lot of fun.
Yeah, I did enjoy that. We got some of the play test part of it and the Kickstarter, so we had the early edition several years ago and really had a lot of fun with the new changes, the newness of it. For Best Writing, we had Frostbitten and Mutilated, Zach Smith for Lamentations of Flame Princess. And again, gold went to Harlem Unbound, Darker Hue Studios. We'll come back and we'll talk about Harlem Unbound in just a minute.
Definitely.
And then the last couple of words here, Product of the Year. The silver went to the Delta Green, the RPG, Arc Dream Publishing, and gold went to Zweihander, Grim and Perilous RPG, Grim and Perilous Studios. Hopefully we'll have the Dan Fox, creator of that. He will be on here a little later with us. I think he's going to try to join us.
I definitely like to pick his brain. Zweihander was certainly a dark horse in this year's awards. So.
And then the Fans' Choice Best Publisher, silver went to Chaosium Inc., and gold went to Wizards of the Coast, which I believe is a repeat exactly of last year's fan favorite publisher. So they're definitely both doing some amazing things and keeping their fans happy. So that was exciting to see. I'll also go ahead and talk about Judges Spotlights here real quick. Fever Swamp was Reese Carter's pick. Operation Unfathomable was Sean McCoy's pick. Faith was this gentleman's here pick, and I'll let you talk about that. Winterhorn by Bully Pulpit Games, that was Denise Robinson's pick. And Kurt Wiegel's pick was the Pip System core book, and I know he specifically talked about how that's a great system to be used when you're trying to teach people about gaming, particularly children. It's a great entry-level way to teach RPGs. But you want to talk about Faith?
Yeah, so Faith is a sci-fi RPG. It's the second edition, and it was released by Burning Games. And when it came to, I'm traditionally not a sci-fi player, right? My wheelhouse is in heroic fantasy, obviously a little bit of, that kind of roguish charm sort of game. But Faith really made me consider getting involved in sci-fi. In a world of, starfinders and verts and voids and, things that get really space operatic or space horror, Faith kind of fills a space that is it's science fiction for the sake of science fiction. I really enjoyed the rule set. I have a tradition of being a poor roller. Dice do not favor me at all. And Faith is card-based, so it runs off of a deck of cards. There's some hand management involved. There's communication with the other players so that you're managing your resources as a team. All of that really playing into making a great system. But the part about Faith that really got me is reading it. The first 300 pages of this 450-page book are all world building. There's not a single rule in those first pages until you get all the way to page 300. And that, to me, is a really bold thing to do because, it's a second edition of a rule set. And so when you have a second edition of a rule set, they want to highlight, here are the things that we've done, here are the changes that we've made. And the team at Burning Games said, no, our game is about our world and how you play in that world. And so even though this is a second edition of a rule set, we're going to spend a lot of time and effort cleaning up our world, and we're going to give you our world first before we let you get into our characters.
That is a bold choice, because that can be very intimidating, because Faith is a big book. And to turn around and say, yeah, by the way, we're not even going to get to the game until 2/3 of the way in. We're going to start by teaching you the world. That could be a little off-putting to some folks. So I'm glad that you're pointing out that actually it was a benefit for you.
It definitely was. I mean, they did a really good job of presenting a coherent world. The art feeds very well into their theme. There's a number of artists in the book, but it all seems as though it was done through one art director. It very much pulled everything together. Some great CG art, some great hand-drawn art, and then really doing a lot with combining that into art that is, represents both. I said this at the awards ceremony, but I really feel like Faith actually, some of the art in there would do a good job of challenging some of our AAA video game publishers as far as what does computer-generated art, what's the potential, what should it look like or what could it look like? And for a tabletop RPG to be able to do that is really just impressive, especially as much as it holds to what Faith represents and what the game is about. So. Okay.
Very interesting. Well, I'm now going to talk a little bit about the ENnie Awards, what they are, how they came about, and feel free to chime in with what interested you with the ENnies. But I know that we get a lot of questions about exactly how the ENnies work, what they are, and trying to get our name out there even a little more, because the ENnies are about the fans. They are, they started, this was our 18th annual ENnie Awards this year. It started on the Eric Noah EN World website, and it started as the website's fan base saying, hey, we really need to do some recognition of individuals and show that we love what they're doing and we want to reward them for that. And so it just started on the website and slowly became more of a award show, and then became contacted with Gen Con. So now we are the EN World Gen Con awards for RPGs. And with that, of course, we just call them the ENnies because that's a really big mouthful otherwise. But what we do is, the basics are the fans pretty much choose everything. At the beginning, we just had our award show Friday night. The fans voted in the top 5 judges for the year, and that is from the list of everyone that self-nominated themselves. So we haven't handpicked judges. It is all based on the fans reading bios. We have a long bio that they need to fill out, and then they take a look and they vote for them, and then the top 5 get in. It's the same with the categories. So at that point, the judges have the year, and starting from anything published from May 1st of this year all the way through the end of April next year, are eligible to be submitted to the ENnies, and they submit copies to all the judges, and they spend the year going through all the products. I know we had over 500 this year. How was that challenge for you?
So that's an exercise in time management, that's for sure. In addition to just the boxes and boxes that would come to the door, right, and cataloging everything, making sure that you received everything. My wife would come home from work and she'd be like, Brian, you've got 6 boxes on the door. And I'd be like, oh man, I still have 10 books to get through. So definitely an exercise in time management. But the ENnies support staff does a really great job of filtering through a lot of that and giving it to us in bits that are manageable, which I definitely appreciate. I know Hans and Matthew, who are our co-submission coordinators, did a really great job, and I appreciate everything that they did for us this year. Because being my first year, I had no idea what I was signing up for. I signed up for it again, so obviously
You must have enjoyed it.
I enjoyed myself, but I definitely had absolutely no idea. And talking to the other judges who had done it before at the beginning, they kind of gave me a snapshot, but it really is a passion project from the staff who run the ENnies to the judges who review the products and try to give you a really great cultivated list. But it was definitely a lot of work, but I enjoyed it, and I look forward to doing it again.
Good, yeah, we look forward to having you again. And that's exactly right. The ENnies are completely volunteer-based. It's a non-for-profit, and we pretty much do this for the love of gaming and the love of giving some recognition where recognition is due. And then once the judges spend their year going through all the products that are submitted, both electronically and in hard copy, we get them both, is that we turn around and the judges then, toward the end of June, have to come up with their top 5 list in every category. And I was a judge myself for 5 years, and I know that in and of itself is a lesson in negotiation and strong opinions. But that's why there are 5 very different individuals that are voted in by the fans to make sure that everything is covered, that everything has gotten a fair look across different roles of gaming. I know that there's even though gaming is a smaller hobby, there are a lot of groups within there that are very different from each other.
I think one of the things that I really discovered this year, being a heroic fantasy role player focused primarily on D20 systems, right, was the exposure to just the width and the breadth of the industry. The different books, the different styles of role play, the different levels of rules involvement, and how passionate everybody was about it. From your entire group of horror fans who really enjoy what Chaosium puts out to the old school Revolution and all of the different source books that they put out, to the things that Paizo created this year and Wizards of the Coast and all of those things. Really, it gave me an appreciation that I did not have for what goes on here at Gen Con and what goes on in all of those publishing houses, because they really are just labors of love, and you can see it in every single piece.
Okay. It is. That was the best part of being judges, finding all those unique things you never would have been exposed to otherwise, and that was always why I enjoyed it. This year, I was able to kind of look over the shoulders a little bit as you guys were judging, and Heavy Metal Thundermouse was the one for me. I went out and first day here, I went out and bought myself a copy because it was like, I love the concept of it, and it just seems like so much fun.
Yeah, well, and I really am a fan of RPGs that can be really targeted or tailored towards children too, right? As the stewards of the hobby, right, as an adult, and having children myself, or having a child myself, right? We definitely need to be getting ready to bring in that next generation so that the hobby can continue and we can pass on all the joy and fun and tribality that we've gotten through our years of playing to that next generation. And something like Heavy Metal Thunder Mouse or Uh-Oh Monsters or I'm a Guide or you know, A Feast of Flavor, all of those really did a great job this year of being aimed at that audience. And so it really is great to be able to give them some recognition for it.
Yeah, and mad props to Brian here because at the very end, when the judges are doing their final pick, his wife had a baby. So he's brand new dad in the midst of all of this stress. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
And we're excited for the next generation.
Definitely are. Definitely.
And thank you, Mrs. Nowak, for allowing Brian to continue in this madness.
Thank you for letting me come to the convention. Definitely.
Exactly.
Baby is 5 weeks old as of tomorrow, so it was.
And name?
Theodore Atlas.
Theodore Atlas. Yes. Oh, very good. Very good. Are you a Bioshock fan?
I'm caught red-handed.
Well, let me go back and talk a little bit about the rules. Something that we always get. We get asked about, or that comes up because people like to say what they think about the ENnies, but then what some of the things said are not quite accurate. So we have some checks and balances in place, just so that you're aware, that anything that's submitted actually goes to both Hans and myself, and this year my husband Matthew assisted Hans because there was a lot of things going on personally in our lives, and we wanted to make sure that the judges were well supported. So in order to do that, we went ahead and made co-submissions coordinators. And when anything is entered into our website, which is the ENnie-awards.com, we get an email with all the information in it, and that email goes to both Hans and to myself. That way we know we're covered. There's 2 people getting the information at any one time, and then at that point Hans gathers it, or the submissions coordinator gathers it and sends it out to the judges, usually in a weekly email. We don't usually try not to inundate judges with emails constantly every time something is submitted, because there could be anywhere from 1 to 15 items submitted a day, particularly toward the end. April is pretty crazy. Those might be daily emails of multiple things in them. So then the judges get them. We have a kind of a Dropbox system for anything electronically. Otherwise, we have tracking for anything that is submitted hard copy. And this year we did have a judge in Australia. So we were making sure that we had that tracked appropriately. We have had judges represented from all over the world, from Turkey and from Poland. This year, I believe we do have the 2019 judges. I believe one of them is Canadian.
Okay.
So we continue to have a little bit of an international presence, which I love, because the ENnies are for everyone. They're not just a U.S.-based voting system.
Yeah, to your point, Stacy, once we released those nominations this year, we all kind of sit, chewing our fingernails as we wait to see how the community reacts to all the hard work we've done to try and present a list of books that really kind of cuts the entire industry and represents everything that we're doing. And it was really kind of, being the first time that I've gone through the judging process, there was a little bit of consternation as responses were coming in, because, fans really want to see their publishers represented in those nomination lists. And oftentimes you're looking at it and you're going, well, unfortunately that publisher didn't submit, right?
Right.
And when a publisher doesn't submit, even though it's a great product, or a great podcast or a great website, if the author or publisher doesn't submit, we can't consider it, even though we might like to,
Exactly, and something we do for that is as we get toward the end of the season, around February and March, the submissions coordinator sends an email out to all the contacts at the publishing companies that we haven't heard from to remind them, hey, don't forget the ENnies. And sometimes they're very appreciative of that because they do forget. I mean, they're very busy. They have other things going on. So we absolutely try to remind them and make sure that they're aware of the deadlines for everything, because it would be a real shame if, in fact, they did accidentally miss out on the deadline, and unfortunately, it happens sometimes. We were very lucky we did not have that issue this year. But yeah, so we're very encouraging, and if you've noticed, as we keep a running list out on the website of what has been submitted to date, so fans can go out there and look, and if you're not seeing a particular publication out there, you are more than welcome to contact your publisher or your writing buddy if you know that they were involved in one of the projects, to say, hey, have you submitted for an ENnie yet? I love your product. Really, you should try. You should absolutely submit. Because again, yes, if something is not submitted, it cannot be considered by the judges.
I think that's how we ended up with enough submissions in the organized play category this year too. Really happy to see that. Organized play has been an important part of my RPG experience. And so being able to get recognition for those independent authors who do it as really passion projects is really great. But I know that came about because one person submitted and then said, hey, I'm submitting, and
right.
You all should too, because how great would it be to get your name out there. And the new models that companies are adapting that allow the author to maintain the rights to the product and resell it and
right.
publish it, self-publish it, really has been great for those authors, just as far as developing income streams, but also in just allowing them to be super diverse in the work that they present.
Right.
When I think about the list of nominees that we had for organized play, it was all D&D Adventure
It was,
leagues.
yes.
It was, but the majority of what we received was D&D Adventure League product. But those adventures were, they ran the gamut from an adventure that involved, a morally gray decision about what to do with a child who was turned into a vampire, to an attack on Baldur's Gate, right? So, I mean, those are very different ends of the spectrum. One is a little bit fun and one was a little bit dark. But it definitely is great to see that category in particular for me really start to take off, and I'm excited about what it's going to look like next year.
Yeah, I am too. I think people were surprised, like, we didn't know about it. Well, it's because it had been out there for a while, but folks just didn't realize it was a category. I would like to go ahead. We do have one of our guests joining us. Kat Tobin is here to talk from Pelgrane Press. Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, thank you for coming. The Pelgrane Press has been a very well represented in the ENnies over the years, and very, I know you've had many medals. You probably couldn't walk with all the medals that you could wear around your neck.
Yeah. Ken Knight is particularly fond of getting them all to clink as he walks. Swagger that just gets them all making noise. We have been very, very fortunate over the years to have won quite a few awards, including the year that we won all of the awards for the Dracula dossier, winning best fan or silver for fan publisher, and that to me was mind-blowing. We are a tiny, tiny company, and most of the time we're just me sitting in my house. So for us to really feel like we're able to reach our fans in such a way that they acknowledge that by first of all nominating us and then voting for us, it's really humbling, but it's also a really fantastic reward for us personally in terms of people seeing what we're doing. So we really appreciate the ENnies giving us that space to work with our customers on that.
Excellent. Yeah, and I agree. I think that's why the ENnies exists, right?
Yeah.
Is to recognize the people. And you said sitting in your house working.
Yep.
I mean, nobody is getting astronomically rich
No
in this
one-
industry. It is all about the passion and the love
Absolutely,
of the game.
it is.
So I'm glad that it has had such a positive impact for you.
It really, really has. It's just one of those things that I can always look at that trophy and know that what I'm doing is making a difference in people's lives. And that's incredibly meaningful and incredibly rewarding for us.
Okay, absolutely.
yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. Well, in this year you had a couple products that were nominated.
We did, yes. So I brought them along with me to show you.
Brilliant.
And just to chat about. So I'm just going to see if we can do this here. So the first one that I wanted to talk about was #Feminism. And this was nominated for Best RPG-related product.
But it's actually a collection of 34 nano games. So they're individual short RPGs that range in time from about quarter of an hour of runtime to about an hour. And they're for up to 2 to 5 players. Each of the games is rated on a teardrop scale from 1 to 5 in terms of intensity. So you can play kind of silly games about selfies, or you can play more heavy-hitting games about really intense and difficult topics like military sexual trauma. They're written, all of the games address contemporary feminist themes, and they're written by feminists from all over the world. So this is it's an anthology that was pulled together by Lizzie Stark, Anna Westerling, and Misha Buschjager. And when we saw it, we fell completely in love with it as a project, and we desperately wanted to get it to more people. So we begged them to let us publish it. So we're really excited to be working with this product, and delighted again that it was nominated for Best RPG-related product.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love the variety of it, because there really is something in there for everyone, and I love that it is created by a group that is pushing forward in the industry, has not had as much representation in the past. Although I will say this year in the ENnies we had an amazing.
It was great. Yeah, it was probably the most diverse awards winners that I've ever seen.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was fantastic. So yeah, again, we're really proud to be part of that with #Feminism, and kind of seeing the ENnies like recognizing the projects that people are trying to do to create change in the industry.
Yes.
Yeah, I think without getting into too much detail about deliberations, #Feminism was definitely one of those ones that ended up on my list of this is a non-negotiable for me. It has to be on our nominations,
thank you.
right?
Yeah.
I think RPGs really have an opportunity to help people understand, right, what different people go through.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, one of the key elements of role-playing is literally empathizing with somebody else. It's taking on somebody else's life and somebody else's experience and living through those. And I think that role-playing as a medium can be incredibly powerful as an educational tool, as well as being an entertainment tool. So #Feminism is really kind of trying to do that and show people what life is like for other people.
Well, and that's what role-playing is putting your feet in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is just an interesting, different set of shoes, maybe.
Yeah, and we've had such a positive response from educators. So we're getting a lot of college professors picking it up to play through with their students, because games in general are a really engaging way of teaching particularly difficult topics it's difficult to get people to look at things from different perspectives. But games have a great way of automatically engaging students with the material.
Okay. Yeah, I had not thought about that. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
What a great additional way of helping.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And then I see you also have your Cthulhu Confidential.
I don't know if we're gonna get this on the camera, but I'm gonna hold it up anyway, just in
And
case.
we have many cameras in front of us.
So. Many cameras, it's like a whole dazzling array of them. I don't know where I'm supposed to be looking. So I also brought along Cthulhu Confidential, which is the first game that we've released in our Gumshoe 1-to-1 system. And Gumshoe 1-to-1 takes our standard Gumshoe investigative role-playing system, and it tweaks it for 1 GM and 1 player. So Cthulhu Confidential is a noir Cthulhu mythos setting, and you can play one of 3 protagonist characters. Again, I'm going to try and hold it up so that we can see the cover here. So the one on the left is written by multi-ENnie award-winning Chris Spivey, and that's Langston Wright. So he's a World War II vet who gets injured and is sent back home. So he's been a hero fighting for his country in Europe, but he comes back to Homefront, Washington in the 1940s World War, and he's fighting the Jim Crow laws and systemic racism. So he's going from being this, incredibly celebrated and validated hero for his country to fighting some really terrible injustices along with the Cthulhu mythos. The second protagonist character you can play is Vivian Sinclair, which was written by Ruth Tillman. And she's a 1930s journalist in New York. And again, similarly to Langston, she's fighting systemic sexism in the industry. She's a woman doing a man's job at a time when very few women were even working, much less actually getting out there and showing the men how to do what they're doing. And then the last protagonist character is called Dex Raymond, and he's just a kind of a classic Philip Marlowe-esque LA gumshoe detective, you know, the hat and the cigarette and frosted glass pane window.
Absolutely.
So all three protagonist characters are set in very noir kind of versions of their respective cities, and all of the details are included in the book for playing through them. So we're finding this really, really helpful for people who are maybe intimidated about the idea of joining an existing group or role-playing for the first time. So a lot of people are picking it up and using it as a way to ease people into the idea of role-playing.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a lot less intimidating to just play in a one-to-one kind of setting than it is to join a group of 6 people, all of whom are laughing and joking and have their own banter going on.
Sure. Especially if you're an
Yeah.
introvert. You know,
Yeah.
going and sitting down at a gaming table looking at a bunch of strangers is terrifying.
It is,
I'm one myself. It took me a long time to get to the point where I could, you know, show up at a table at a convention and just sit down and be comfortable doing that. So I think that this is absolutely
Yeah.
a great way to help folks get comfortable with
Absolutely.
that process.
We're also finding that a lot of couples are playing it. It's like what they're doing on their date night. I mean,
Totally gonna have to try
yeah,
that.
I know, right? I think it's fantastic. I'm like, but the great thing about, because as I'm, for me personally, as I've gotten older, I find it harder and harder to schedule games with people because people have families and some people have real jobs, and so it's really hard to get a group of people together. But you can always grab one person. So it's a really, it's bringing role playing to people in a much more accessible way than it has been previously. You know, it's very easy to just grab one person and then you've got a game.
And I'm glad to see gumshoe stretching
Yes.
to allow for that. You know, we've used gumshoe in many different settings, and it's very versatile. So it's nice to see that, yes, it actually we can do to the one-on-one. with
Yeah,
it as well.
exactly. Yeah.
I think one of the appeals of Cthulhu Confidential too is when you think about Lovecraftian stories, right? It's never 5 people trying to conquer the mythos, right? It's
Yeah.
always one person and what that experience looks like. And if you think about RPGs as an opportunity to experience a novel, right, or participate in some of those stories, it really outlines, especially in Gumshoe 1-to-1, it really outlines what that can look like, right? And so it's a great inspiration for those people who
Yeah.
want to dive into that level of detail.
Absolutely. I mean, it really is an emulation engine if you want to be a Sam Spade, right? That's exactly what it's doing. You can have that entire experience.
And what do you have upcoming? Do you have anything released at Gen Con?
We do. We've actually releasing at Gen Con, we've got The Fall of Delta Green. So we're taking, I say new at Gen Con. I mean, as of Sunday morning, sold out at Gen Con.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
It is, yeah. So Fall of Delta Green takes formerly Pagan Publishing, now Arc Dream Publishing's phenomenal, bleak and intense and gritty Cthulhu mythos Delta Green setting, and it converts it into Gumshoe in the 1960s. So
Okay.
while Delta Green were still, if not known about, they were still a legal organization and government approved before they disbanded and went underground. So you play through all of the bureaucracy that's involved with working with the government agencies, as well as all of the really personal horror that Delta Green brings. It has instead of kind of looking at how much damage you take from a Cthulhu mythos creature, instead of looking at whether it hits you or not, it looks at the impact that dealing with those kind of horrors on a day-to-day basis has on your mind. It has on your relationships with other people. You can't just take your hat off at the end of the day and leave all of that behind. You bring it into your home. You bring it into your relationships with your spouse, your children. And Delta Green and Fall of Delta Green they've both included mechanics for really representing that degradation of everything that makes you human. So as you're going out protecting the world from these hideous horrors, you're losing effectively your humanity, everything that keeps you part of our society.
No one gets out unchanged.
Exactly. So for me, I love the tension of that. I love the kind of sure, you're saving the world, but at what cost to you? There's a realism to Delta Green and to Fall of Delta Green that I think very few other Cthulhu mythos kind of settings have. So I really love it. I'm really excited that we're able to bring it into Gumshoe. And also, it's the 60s. It's, you
Well,
know,
I was going to say,
era
that's
of,
a
like,
really interesting time.
It is.
Time frame choice.
And I don't understand why there aren't more games about it, because there's such a wealth of material out there for. It was such a fantastic decade historically. It was so many things going on: psychedelic drugs, you know, protests, various wars in Indochine. It's a decade crammed full of fascinating things, and Fall of Delta Green allows you to pick any of those aspects and wrap them up in a Delta Greenish wrapper. So it's, yeah, there's
Very
a lot
exciting.
of scope in it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I didn't realize it was 60s. I have not had a chance to go over and browse
Yeah.
much, and so I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear about
And
60s.
we, it's also one of the most gorgeous books I think we've ever produced. I mean, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but we recruited in a visual artist called Jen McCleary, and she just gave it an incredibly cohesive, poppy, psychedelic, colorful look by creating original art all the way through it. So it's just, as well as being a really great and dramatic game to play, it's also gorgeous to look at.
Can't wait to see it on the show.
Yeah. So that's what we had at the show before we sold out of it.
Okay, very good. Is there any final things you'd like to talk about? Otherwise, well, I know you're very busy, so I appreciate you taking time to come
no,
talk
well,
with us.
thank you
for a
so
few
much for
minutes.
having me. It's been great to chat. I could maybe mention The Yellow King, which is our next big
Please.
project that's coming up. So we're hoping to release that towards the end of the year. We kickstarted it last year, so far, because Robin Laws is running it, it's actually running like clockwork. I don't know how he does it. He has some kind of skill. But yeah, so we're currently on target to deliver it when we told the backers we would,
Brilliant.
which is unheard of, in December. So that's inspired by Robert Chambers' Yellow King
Yep.
short story collection. And it's going to be a 4 hard case book set in a slipcase. So it's a very different form factor for us. It's still dealing with a kind of a mythos flavor. So we're comfortable with that, but the form factor is really different.
Okay.
So we're excited about it. We haven't done a slipcase before, but all the cool kids are doing it. So we're hoping it works out. So
Well,
yeah.
and the Yellow Sign is a very unique, a story for Lovecraft. So it's
Yeah.
there's a lot you can do with it.
There
It's very
is,
unique.
and Robin's really taken it and created. He wrote a collection of short stories called New Tales of the Yellow Sign a couple of years ago, and that's really influenced the whole setting.
Okay.
But he's basically taken Belle Epoque Paris from the original stories, and then said, well, what if we lost that war and the King in Yellow and his minions effectively infiltrated our world? How would our world then look different through effectively the parallel universe of the wars in Europe in the 50s, the 40s and 50s? And then how would it look after those wars if we lost those, if we couldn't get rid of them? How would life under that regime look? And then the 4th book is called This Is Normal Now, and it's set in the modern day, but it's not our modern day. It's the King in Yellow modern day.
Oh, okay.
So it's a really interesting journey through the 4 different stages of the Yellow King's infiltration of our world.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I look forward to it.
So that's the thing that I'm kind of most excited about that we're doing
peek.
this year. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for
Yeah,
your time.
thank
I
you
appreciate it.
so much for having me. It's been great to chat.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
and thank you again for putting out all your the unique and different and wonderful things that Pelgrane Press does. We so appreciate it.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
At this point, I do have a couple of other staff members, if you are available to come on up. I see movement, all we see are really bright lights. I maybe see a hand waving here, but they're getting mic'd up, so we will give them a second. In the meantime, Brian, what is there a particular topic that any particular product that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I assume we're going to save Harlem Unbound for a little bit later, right?
Yeah, well, you know what? We can talk about it now. I think that's a good idea. I know that we do have potentially Sam Webb coming for Star Trek, and we do have Dan Fox coming at 11:30. He was confirming with me on my phone.
Good.
At 11:30 to talk about Zweihander, and they were the big winners of Best Game and Product of the Year. But I think honestly, the big winner of the year was Harlem Unbound.
Harlem Unbound, 100%. And I stopped after the show just to talk to Chris and tell him like his wins were definitely well deserved. Harlem Unbound really pushes a lot of the envelope in what's acceptable or what we can explore in an RPG and in a game. And it's done in a way that really it makes it accessible. Which was really pleasing. Again, it's one of those books that ended up on my we have to nominate this list. The second I cracked it open and read, about half of it, I was like, this is we would not be doing the fans a service by not nominating this, right?
And he came to his first Gen Con a couple years ago, and when he accepted the first of many at the ENnie Awards Friday night, which we do have recorded out on our website. You can watch it if you want to go back and watch some of these. I totally recommend that for some of the acceptance speeches we did have. But he talked about coming to his first Gen Con and feeling lost and feeling, that he was just one of such a large crowd, didn't know anyone, was feeling very uncomfortable, and he made one friend. And in making that one friend, it opened him up to this entire industry, and now he's making products that people are, excited for and are recognizing. I mean, the Harlem Unbound was also nominated for the Diana Jones Award this year. Kat just talked about, he wrote one of the characters for Cthulhu Confidential. So I love that it just showed up as an attendee at a show, and a few years later is really making a difference in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a great Cinderella story, where somebody who just has all these ideas finds that outlet and that support to be able to put that product in front of everybody. And I mean, how many was it? 7? I know.
Yeah, I don't off the top of my head, but I think he ended up with 4 or 5 pieces of bling around his neck.
He won in every category that we nominated him.
He did.
And it was well deserved, from interior, from cover art to writing to setting. All of those things really were done. The book was well researched. The book presented things in a way, like I had said before, that was accessible. And then it's always fun just to be able to explore environments, especially in the Cthulhu mythos, that you haven't seen before, right? 1920s Harlem is something that you haven't seen before anywhere. And so for that to really be put out there, and then for him to get that recognition for it, really is just awesome. It's awesome to be a part of, and it's awesome to see and be able to celebrate with him.
Yeah, and I don't think we mentioned Harlem Unbound is actually a setting for Call of Cthulhu. And the cover has a little Cthulhu on a window, so you can't miss it. But it is a really, really wonderful product.
Published by Darker Hue Studios.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Now I'll bring up Jody Klein and Matthew Muth. They are judges. They have both been judges on several occasions for the ENnie Awards, and now our staff. Matthew this year assisted with the submissions coordination, and Joni also ran our video for the awards show and does our website information. I'm going to make him work really hard this year because we're going to update our website into the modern age, as it were. But gentlemen, what did you think of the ENnies this year?
I was really happy. I thought the ceremony went off very well. It's always a great pleasure there to see all the positive. A lot of times, especially on the internet, there's a lot of griping, there's a lot of complaining, but you get everybody in the room, get a couple beers in them, and everybody's really happy. They're congratulating each other. They're talking about all these wonderful products that they've worked on all through the year, and there's just this sense of joy and happiness that you don't get except when you've got all those people in the room together.
And you really caught some of that, I think, in the acceptance speeches. They were some of the more eloquent, just welcoming speeches I have heard from a group in quite some time. So I was very interested to hear what they had to say. which, as I said, was just very, very well spoken and very, very positive.
And fast this year, too.
Fast. Yes.
Yes, we didn't have to get out any extra hooks to haul folks away. What was, I know that both of you are very involved in the industry as well and play a lot of role-playing games. What were some surprises? From you too, as Brian, that kind of came across that came out of nowhere you weren't looking for, but was pleased by?
I was really pleased to see Happiest Apocalypse on Earth get the nomination.
That is an amazing game.
Just recently ran that a couple weeks ago for some locals in DC. It's a great game. We had a lot of people coming by the booth and asking about it. It's got a great elevator pitch. You can just say Disney World meets Cthulhu. And everybody just immediately says, "Oh my God, I could run so many cool things."
Yeah, I have run
this.
that probably 8 times in the past year. It has been an amazingly fun, sort of zany, dark humor experience. Obviously, it's excellent for a one-shot, but one of the things, the feedback I got almost every single time is, this could be like a 6 or 8 session game. You could play this all summer, and it would be a pretty good experience because there's enough there.
Yeah, and you can sort of escalate things as it goes on. But that's another product that's, it's a small publisher, single-person publisher.
Right. Christopher West.
Right, that gets, tends to get overlooked.
Sorry, Gray, not West. West is the maps. And Christopher Gray.
But that tends to get overlooked, and this can be a huge thing for them to get that kind of recognition for a product that's just absolutely fantastic.
And something I want to bring up, and Brian, you might be able to help a little bit more with this. As the submissions coordinator this year, it was part of my job, to see all the products that come in and put them in our spreadsheet and so forth and so on. So I would take a peek at a lot of these products, especially the electronic ones, because I'm sitting there at my desk, it comes in, I wonder what this thing is. There were some just amazingly unusual and diverse products, and I cannot remember the name of this one. You might be able to help me out here. But it was a game set during a zombie apocalypse where all the player characters are vampires. So there is this sort of, oh dear, what are we going to do? But do you remember what the name of that
I
was?
wish that I could. It was one that we considered under free products because
Yeah,
it was a free PDF.
It was just awfully wonderful.
It was. No, I can't. It's escaping me.
I was racking my brain earlier. And then there was another one that came in. Again, I feel horrible about forgetting some of the names of these because there's 500 products that come in and they all kind of move together, especially since I didn't have to read them. I just kind of glanced at it. But there was this beautifully horrific game with the artwork. I mean, it was like a 400-page book. It was set in some kind of, I don't know, Kingdom Death Monster sort of setting. And the artwork was so evocative, and I will remember the name of the game as soon as I walk out that door later. But it was a very simple name, like Nyx or Fear, or a French name maybe, or a Latin name. I wish I could remember it. But
one of my downfalls, Matthew, and you've pinned it, is I don't remember names. I don't remember movie lines. We could have a conversation about it, but I'm not going to remember what it was called.
But it speaks it speaks broadly to the idea of the amount of diverse and unusual products that we are living in, kind of, the most wonderful times. In the past few years, the amount of things that someone has been able to publish, either electronically or in a physical format, and put that out there to the fans. There are fans for everything. We were talking earlier about #Feminism. You have the ability to have these hard story games that explore some often difficult themes. Yet we also live in a time when the old school movement is also at its height. So there is literally something for everyone.
Yeah, I think the advent of PDF distribution and print on demand has really had just a drastic impact on independent publishers, right? It's made everybody's ideas accessible if they're willing to put in the time and effort. And it was really, it's always great as a judge to receive a paper copy of a book, right? But being able to see just some of the passion projects and recognize some of those PDFs that we recognized. Modos 2 was, one of my nominations for the PDF category.
I like that one too. That was very good.
Right, and it's just, one guy coming up with an independent rule set and wanting to put it out in front of everybody. How great is that?
So
have something you were
let's put a pin in this for a minute, because I do have a comment. We'll talk about a little bit about red markets, because it slides right into this as well.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I do have Sam Webb here to talk about another big winner for the ENnies. Thank you, Sam, for joining us. I appreciate it. Come on in and have a seat. And again, congratulations on yours. I see you've brought your awesome products. So maybe talk a little bit about what the ENnies means to you.
Well, it was just incredible, really. I mean, I was properly choked when we actually got up the first time. I'm like, I want to thank, because I've never really properly won anything in my life. So it was just really, really endearing and really humbling to be up there to kind of accept even the silver awards. It was really, really nice. Particularly on Star Trek Adventures, because that was really the thing that was kind of my baby when it came to Modiphius. So I came in as Chris Birch's kind of publishing assistant, right. And then there was a time where we needed to pick up a bit more work on Star Trek Adventures, and I kind of leaned over to him. He was only just over the way from me at the desk, and I was like, well, Chris, you know that I've been managing Star Trek for the last couple of months. Can that be my job? And he was like, well, so long as you're, all the rest of the stuff you have to do for me is covered as well.
You take on more.
And then slowly my work just became Star Trek Adventures. So I kind of took the helm with that, and the whole process for me was a learning experience as well, because it was actually the first time I'd ever worked on an RPG. I'd been in kind of theatre before. I'd known a bit more about kind of creative processes and getting something into a kind of production, as it were, but I'd never actually worked on RPGs before. But as the kind of project manager, I suppose, a lot of my job was just kind of getting people to do the work for me, but yeah, so I'm really proud of the book.
Yes, please, show them to the audience.
I'm really proud of Best Rules, and then for the limited edition kind of cover that we had with the ribbons and stuff.
Yep.
Also really proud of the production values win that we got as well, just because, if we look inside the interior, it's very similar to what we would have in the limited edition anyway.
Mm-hmm. They're almost identical.
Yeah.
But I do have to say the ribbon colors were a lovely choice in the collector's edition. They're all
the Pantones
yes, they
of the uniforms as well. That was
yes, they
pretty
match
crazy.
the uniforms.
Yeah, but a big thanks to, like I said up on the stage, to Matthew Comben, who worked on the graphic design for us. Really took Mike Okuda's LCARS system and made it work in a book, which was really, really cool. And I know we've had a bit in with the fans in terms of kind of the choice of white text on black, but we really, we agonized over that choice. We had them laid out all on the floor at one point, black on one side and white on the other, and we're thinking it's kind of got to be this because this looks like Star Trek. Mm-hmm. And I think that lends itself to when, Nathan's working on the rules development side of things, that, what I hear from a lot of people, and I've heard it a lot this convention, is that this is the game that feels like Star Trek, I've stepped onto the bridge or beamed down onto a planet and we're trying to resolve things, either peacefully or just with any other means. And we're out there to discover things, not out there to kind of, goblin bother or anything, So that was really
Instead, it's tribbles.
So how was it working with Paramount? Did you have a close relationship with them, or did they have some quality control over?
Yeah, not so much with Paramount. So we work with CBS Studios.
Oh, CBS. Right.
But they've been incredible to work with, actually. I mean, they know the game, really, because, they've got various different licenses for different accessories and T-shirts and all sorts of other stuff. So they've actually been really easy to work with, really professional service online to go and approve stuff. And they're also really quick as well. I mean, thankfully, a couple of choke points we had early on in the production, and we were like, look, we really need to get on with this to get to Gen Con last year to release it. And they were like, right, okay, no, we'll make sure we're on it. And I'm so thankful for that too.
Did Shatner ever call you up and
We tried to call Shatner to write a foreword, and I don't think he ever really got back to us, because I don't know the money was there.
I could talk to him last weekend. We were at the Raleigh Supercon, and he was there.
Nice.
So I'm a big Star Trek fan. So I was thrilled by this product, and the cover of the collector's edition is the Enterprise. It's like a call. And it drags you right into that as well. So I'm giddy, and I see you have the miniatures there as well. Which are wonderful.
Tiny Patrick Stewart and crew. These were awesome to work on as well. And actually, again, not something I ever thought I'd be doing, but actually working on the poses and working on with sculptors to working on the detail and stuff. It's been incredible. So Johnny is our internal lead sculptor. He works on a lot of our products. He did Patrick Stewart in the set. But then we have a couple of others who worked on the set too, freelance. That's Albert Yu and Anna Roman. And it's just fantastic because, you know, Anna delivered me Tiny Michael Dorn. That's like, do you know what I mean? And so it was really cool to work on that and trying to come up with really dynamic poses that really suit the characters as well. Was really fun.
I think to your point, the thing that drew me to that set particularly was, I mean, Riker is standing with his leg up, right?
Yeah.
I had to. I couldn't do anything else with that.
It's perfect, a perfect embodiment of the character.
Well, they were looking at him, and and I can say, I will admit, I will say, the judges and the crew, we all sign NDAs so that we don't talk about things that are said. It's to protect the judges, it's to protect publishers. We all, you know, it's the only way really we can run the ENnies and maintain integrity to make sure that you know, one, judges want to do this, and you know, and two, to be fair to everyone. And the one thing they had both of them. They had the original crew and the Next Generation, and like, we have to nominate Next Generation because of Riker, the pose. So
that was it.
That was truly that was truly the conversations. Like, you got to, because Riker is in that classic pose, and yeah. So there you go. So good choice.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and if that's what got it, then that's what got it.
It's the simple things.
It's
really
the simple
is.
things. I mean, the quality is amazing on those. I mean, they really do. You can pick up and go, that is Michael Dorn, you know?
Yeah, and we cast in resin, and we were thinking of that right from the start. So we have a great manufacturer in the UK, CMA, and they've done all the work on this, including all the box printing and everything. And their quality of resin's really, really nice. I haven't worked with miniatures in years. You know, I used to, you know, collect 40K when I was in my teens. It's all plastics and metals and stuff. It was definitely metals back in those days. But then actually looking at resin for the first time, getting in the kind of production samples, and I was just like, this is astounding, like the amount of detail you can get off this. Actually, one thing with CBS that we did have actually was kind of getting them to realize at what scale these things were. So in our submissions now, we send them the submission with a quarter at the coin at the scale, and it's like set up like this, so they understand what it is. Because like my call out in the ENnies to Jonathan Frakes was just that. So they were like, oh right, no, the talent needs to sign off on this, so we need to send them the head. So we sent them the head like this big, and obviously at 32 mil scale, it doesn't really look like Jonathan Frakes. And he was like, no, I don't like that. And I was like, so we had a bit of work getting them to understand that they were going to be this big, and we're not sending you a big high-res file because they're going to be this big. We want you to see them at that scale. So that eventually worked out, and it's been a breeze since then, so, thankfully, yeah.
Well, and then also I see that you have a Conan sitting there.
Yeah, we like our accessories as well, and it was really something that helps players, GMs, really brings the game to life as well at the table. And so we did the GM screen this year for you guys as well. And this just, like your normal GM screen, has lots of tables, lovely layout, brilliant artwork, but also all ours come with quite often like a booklet, so like Infinity does, Conan does, and this is really a lot of more, it's not just copied stuff from the core book either. It's, you know, more advice for the GMs, more random tables, NPC names, place generators, stuff like that. So Mark Langworthy works on a lot of that, and we're really thankful to him that he's done such a great job on it. And I think it's great that we don't just have the screen and try and flog that. It's also about getting the advice out there and getting something that people can flick through quickly, and also good reference material.
So I'm going to say something which might be one of the most uber nerdy things to say, which is saying a lot at Gen Con. But as someone who's been playing games for a lot of years, I've noticed the wonderful evolution of GM screens that started as a 3-prong screen are now turning into nice 4-prong screens. So for some reason, this whole idea of 4 prongs is just so much nicer for, I don't know what it is, but you know, because you used to have just like, you know, 3 and you would not have this
the landscape
4th
3.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so I've noticed an evolution of GM screens which have been 4 panels as opposed to 3. And of course, I wanted to show off this wonderful artwork that you have here on the cover.
Yeah, of course.
It sort
I
of
think
brings.
that's Brom, right? That's the
Well,
Brom cover.
Well, you talk about the evolution of it, and actually, because we did our Board Cube limited edition set, we matched up the GM screens for that, so that if you buy the separate GM screen,
yes.
of course, it's 3 panels, but it's like I don't know, a foot, 30 centimeters squared each panel. So you've got that bit longer, but it's not quite 4. I'm a fan of the 3, but no, I take that.
Fan of the 3, indeed.
Another one of
this
those
backwards.
great RPG schisms now is the 3-panel
GM
GM screen versus
screen
4-panel
game.
GM screen.
Yeah, that'll be our next drama for the year, the GM screen controversies. But I will say something that I really like the trend of as well is the addition of the tools. It's not just a screen, it's now a screen toolkit.
Yeah.
And that is such a major help when you're running a game. And you can't put it, if you put it all on the screen, you can't, it's useless because you can't find anything quick enough as a GM
absolutely.
to play it.
Yeah. And also, if you ever seen kind of like some of Matt Mercer's kind of almost behind the scenes or behind the screen kind of look on things, and he's got lists of just like names and little generators and stuff that he's prepped. And if you've got something like that from the publisher as well, just to help you out, that's great as well, I think.
Exactly. So what's coming up? Do you have anything that you're releasing here that you want to talk about?
So we're helping out White Wolf with publication of the new Vampire 5th edition. So we've got that. The stack is diminishing as we speak. We've been toing and throwing boxes back from the towards the White Wolf stand from us. They came by this morning to grab a load more. So yeah, we've done really well out of that this weekend as well. And we just had a slightly bigger range from last year. Obviously, we released Star Trek last year, but we had fewer other core products. Now Conan's here, Infinity, the role-play game, is here. We've also got all of our other partners. Tales from the Loop ran out on Friday, I think.
Oh, wow,
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
okay.
The guys from Symbaroum. We've also got Sarah Newton down, who's got her Mindjammer stuff. Capernaum is down as well from the French translation that she's just released. So we've got a whole load of stuff on the booth, and we're also demoing the Fallout Wasteland Warfare miniatures game. We don't have it here just yet because it's just getting onto doormats kind of as we speak. Okay. So we thought we'll avoid the controversy. We'll
No, it's reasonable.
Honor our pre-orders and get that out to people first. But that should be in stores this month. It's not too far away at all.
Brilliant. Well, congratulations on your wins and nominations, and I'm sure many more to come.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You should take all this wonderful stuff with you.
Unless you don't want to.
You might be able to sell it.
For offers,
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
So red markets.
Yeah, that's why we were talking about some interesting things. That was something that kind of came out of nowhere that was like, oh, this is really different. What did you guys think? Well, first of all, someone describe Red Markets.
So Red Markets is a economic horror game, which doesn't really sound like it would be very fun or interesting.
I mean, balancing my checkbook can be a horror. So,
but it really is, I think, of the games that we saw this year, it's one of the games that's actually the most representative of like now, right? Like definitely kind of a pulled from the headlines sort of deal. But what happens if the world economy crashes and people turn into zombies, right? Effectively is what we're looking at.
But there's more to it than that, isn't
there is a lot more to it, which is part of what makes it so interesting just as far as the depth, because it's very easy in post-apocalyptic games to go, you know what, it's just about the zombies. But this one isn't. It's about financiers. It's about, class warfare. It's about all those different things that, again, appropriate to, modern conversations, right? Dinner table conversations.
So in red markets, obviously an individual created a fun game, but they also had a philosophical position that they were endorsing or presenting. And what would you say that would be?
So obviously it's critical of current situations, right? It is not something that shines a favorable light on disparities in incomes and wealth and things like that right now, and that comes through very clearly in the game, in that the villains are the people who control the markets. They are not not the people trying to take them down, as it were.
Well, I'll tell you, after seeing that book could actually be used as a weapon in the apocalypse. Because if I got hit by that book, I think I would, have broken bones. So,
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that. That's one of my Gen Con acquisitions, was Red Market, so I'm looking forward to, because it's one of those things where you're looking at, you read the elevator pitch on the back of it, the little blurb on the back of it can be very off-putting. And I'm like, I saw it in the store and I'm like, maybe not. But then I heard so many good things from people from all walks of RPG life that said, oh, this is great, you should check it out. You might actually really like this. So I'm looking forward to picking it.
Yeah,
and
I mean, from the judging standpoint, it was one of those ones that we were pretty universal on, as far as, oh yeah, this actually has some really great things that it's trying to explore and trying to do, and do it in a way that still gets us down to the core of. Not the core, but to the fun part of RPGs of beating things up, right?
And I think Red Markets is another example of one of those unusual games that wouldn't have been made 25 years ago. Because of vanity publishing and the accessibility you have to publishing, it's a lot easier because it is a rather unusual setup. You're taking something which is fairly well known, such as zombies or an apocalypse, and then you're adding another layer to that. Much like Happiest Apocalypse, where you have a horror game, but you add in these quasi-Disney, not Disney for IP reasons, aspects to a horror game, and you create something like that. And that's what I really enjoy, games like that, or at least reading them. I mean, it might be hard to get games like this to the table in a heavy Pathfinder, D&D, Call of Cthulhu, Shadowrun world that we live in, but if you're fortunate enough to have players who are really into that, this is a gold mine of wonderment.
It's definitely worth at least a one-shot experimentation evening.
See, but a game like that occurs to me that it would really shine over a 6 or 7 or 8 session.
Definitely a longer story to be able to really explore some of the themes and the rule sets. But I come from a group that is almost exclusively D20, and getting them to play something else is, like
Monster Hearts.
About as dramatic, yes. And so, if you can get somebody to say, hey, let's do this for a night, right? For any of the games that we've nominated, even if they're really far out of your normal wheelhouse, they're definitely something that you want to explore, just because there's a lot more out there than just the one system that everybody plays, regardless of what that system is, right? Or who that publisher is. There's so much more.
Well, that was one of the most fun I had when I was a judge, because I'd go to a bunch of little cons. I go to Gen Con, I go to Origins, I go to house cons over the weekend or whatever, and okay, these are the things that I like this year. I'm going to make sure I run this and this and this and this and this. And so I'd get a chance to run 6 or 7 or 8 of the games that were going to be nominated for Product of the Year or Best Game or whatever, and actually interact with players that had never seen them before and get feedback kind of from both sides of the screen, which I thought was really valuable in the judging process.
Oh, it definitely is. My friends, so I have moved pretty far away from my core group of friends as I moved into Dallas and things like that for work, but we would still get together for our annual hangouts, and it was like, here they are. I'm running all weekend. Let's go, right? And then getting together too online through different, Fantasy Grounds and Roll20 and all those different virtual tabletops that have really started to take off and make the game more accessible. Really helpful.
And it is really nice that there are now all the different virtual, items out there. Lone Wolf Entertainment Productions is one of our sponsors as well, and they're doing a lot of work with Hero Lab and some really interesting things there. Hex Kit won the Gold ENnie this year, and people were thrilled by that. It's amazing what you can do with that in 5 minutes for your games.
Yeah, well, and then too, it's driving a lot of development in different areas. I know Tabletop Audio was one of our free products.
That was
of the year.
amazing. Tabletop Audio, when I was processing that one and putting that one into the judge's pipeline, I went out there and what is this? I was blown away. Fascinating.
And just the number of mapping tools that we received as submissions, the number of sound sets and things like that everybody is really putting effort into developing. It really does make the game. I mean, if you don't have 4 people around you that you could sit down and play an RPG with, you can go online to some of these communities and find 4 people to sit down with that you don't know, and then you develop that friendship and you come together and then you meet at Gen Con and things like that. Like it really, though that forefront is really doing a lot to drive the growth of the industry, definitely. And it's great to see people supporting it with tools like Lone Wolf, like Sirenscape, like the Tabletop Audio team.
Well, and the fact that we're here on Twitch so for this weekend, I mean, I know that they've been doing live plays as well, and that really also brings it into the home for maybe you might not have been exposed to something. I know when I was a judge and I'd be presented with rules and I'd read it and like, I don't quite understand, I want to see it. I would go find a podcast or find an actual play or a video to watch it, you know, being done to say, oh, okay, I see how they're doing it.
Or sign up for a game at Origins, you know, because Origins is close to the deadline, but not quite.
Yeah, that was usually my last opportunity. It's like, okay, these things came in April. I need to play these. All right, we're doing this and this and this and this.
Yeah, I don't have time to get it all through, but yes, I can play them all.
I remember playing Broken Rooms with you at Origins the 2 years we were judges.
Or Spellbound Kingdoms. We were sitting on
Spellbound
the big bar on 5
Yes, I
at
remember
Origins,
that.
just the 2 of us with dice trying to, okay, I really like these rules. Does this work? Does this work?
So when you're a judge, you judge everywhere and anywhere you can find a flat surface to play.
Yes.
Rolling and judging.
Yes.
Rolling and judging. Indeed. I guess something else I'll talk about is the advent of, we're seeing more music, more produced music. I know we had Sirenscape that was considered this year, and we've also had Midnight Syndicate in the past. They have been nominees and winners.
You know, Midnight Syndicate, Nox Arcana, Midnight Syndicate, those groups that produce that music, that's great. I haven't seen them produce in year recently, but they are here. But Sirenscape, I mean, they put out an amazing product. You know, it's a subscription service, but every month you get more content from them. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Tabletop Audio. I would love to see that grow because it's free. But, you know, if you're listening Tabletop Audio, I think you could actually charge for that, and I think people would provide money.
Definitely.
Because it's that high quality.
Mm-hmm. I think too, I mean, when we look at just the products that we received this year, Seventh Sea had a soundtrack this year,
Yes.
Torg Eternity had a soundtrack this year. So the industry is driving people to create that full experience.
And let's not forget Sense. Sense were actually
Oh, that's
submitted
right.
last year,
Adventure
the year before.
Sense.
Adventure Sense.
Yes,
the smell of the dungeon. You know. Oh
And
my.
they do, yeah. If you ever wanted to know what a dragon's bathroom smelled like, they would provide that experience
Where
to
it's,
you.
know, for those of you who might not be aware, you unscrew the little top and the smell wafts out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there's a limited amount of scents, obviously, like swamp and cave. And,
They actually have quite a long product
Do
line.
they?
Yeah, they were at Origins. I talked to them, and they're broadening out because, you know, when you close your eyes and you go somewhere and you smell something, it takes you back to a memory.
Mm-hmm.
And our memories are tied to scent. So if you're, going into a cave and you smell that cave-like smell, for your players, it's another way to immerse them into a setting. Or,
I'm waiting for back alley.
Well, and part of, I think, some of the sheer joy I still get out of RPGs is getting the physical book. And one of the first things I do is
New book smell.
the
Smell
book
the book.
smell.
It's
It
a
takes
real
you back
thing.
to being
course.
12 or 13 years old.
Without naming any names, there was a book or two that was submitted that I understand did not smell well, but we won't discuss any names.
We talk about new book smell, and then we talk about new book odor.
The copies I got did not smell, but I remember that several of you guys in the conversation were like, "Oh my God, have you smelled that?"
It's a surprise, and it happens sometimes. Ink doesn't smell great,
Yeah.
and some of the books we received this year were shrink wrapped, and so I'm sure that they just carried that industrial smell with them right into our doorsteps. Nothing
Adventure Sense could bottle that.
nothing
game
stuck though. All of those aromas
It's
faded,
all
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
yeah.
now they have that new book smell, a little bit delayed, but definitely it was some fun conversations around what certain books smell like.
So a question that came up earlier while I was kind of waiting in the green room that I was interested in exploring was, obviously, last year was your first year as a judge. This is your second year as a judge. There are new judges with you, and there is one individual who has been a judge several years ago and for several years, so he is very well experienced.
That's Chris
But
Gaff.
if, what do you want to tell the people who are joining with you now, and what do you want to tell anyone who is listening who is considering perhaps themselves being a judge? What should they prepare for? What were some misconceptions you had? What were some things that you realized, if I'd only done this back in August for the full year, what would some advice be?
So that's definitely a great question. And I think the first thing I would have to say is that I'm just grateful for the opportunity to do it again, right?
It was a very rewarding experience
yeah.
when I did it.
It definitely was. It was a lot more rewarding than I expected it to be, right?
Broadens your horizons. And
Yeah, on some level, you're signing up for the product, right? And that is the first draw. But I think that even, when I look at the things that I donated back to the ENnies to auction and things like that, at the end of the process, it wasn't about the products so much as it was about the experience and seeing all of everything that the RPG industry has to offer. So I'm excited to have an opportunity to do it again next year, and looking forward to what is next for RPGs, right? The thing that I wished is I had no idea, right? So talking to some of the other judges, they were like, Brian, you really need to measure this stuff out. Don't wait to the last minute, right? Really get into it. And at the beginning, the products don't flow fast and heavy.
you get a big chunk at Gen Con.
Yep.
And then another like right at the end of the year, and then April.
At Christmas, you get some because the fiscal year has ended. And
Exactly, and I did not take that advice at the beginning, right? But then the Christmas books started flowing in, and I still had all of the Gen Con books to read, and I went, I think we had like 20-something books from the Gen Con delivery, and I had read maybe one or two of them at that point, and then the Christmas books started flowing in, and then the electronic submissions started flowing in as well, and I really had a wake-up call of, I've wasted 4 months of time where I could have read those because you owe it to every publisher to read as much of the book as you can, right? Looking at dust jackets isn't enough, right? Flipping through and reading table of contents and indices is not enough, right? Talking about these are passion projects for people, and as a judge, we owe it to them to consider it in its entirety, right?
Absolutely.
Not portions of it.
And I found that to be probably the hardest part. The time management is an issue, but you'll get better at that now that you know. But it's when you pick up a book and you've got this 400-page tome, and 10 pages into it, you're not feeling it. But you got to go. You got to, okay, maybe I put this down for a while and come back to it, but you owe it to the person who spent all of their time and their effort and their money into producing that book to give it a fair shake, to read the whole thing.
Well, and that's actually one of those instances where I relied on the community, because if I picked something up and I was not feeling it, it has fans somewhere, right? And so it was really just an internet search away to go and, okay, what do people like about this?
And maybe I should focus and look at those.
Right, because if I'm not picking it up, somebody sees it and can tell me what it is, and then I can go in and go, oh, you know what, actually, yeah, I can see this through the whole thing, and it really draws out, the ENnies are for the fans, and so if the fans can find something in it, I should be able to find something in it too. And that I think is really just what this whole process is about, is looking at people's passion projects and being able to say, yeah, you've done a really good job, right? And I think that our list this year has a lot of independent authors on it. There's a fair representation from large publishers as well, but I think that we really did a good job of again, providing that whole swath of the industry some representation in one way or another. And I just hope that, the judges that have signed up for next year will maintain that, right? And help us do that again.
Well, and obviously we're going to look to you to take on a senior role with some of these newer individuals. Because you need to give them this advice day one, so that they don't fall into the same trap.
Well, and something so that the folks know kind of the process of how we once the judges have now been announced, and I think we have a couple of them here at Gen Con for the 2019 crew. What we'll do is we actually have a secret Facebook group that the judges belong to and staff, and we have that there to provide support and guidance and shoulders to cry on, and just to make sure that the judges have what they need, because it is a big task. Yes, you get a lot of great products, but you have to go through all of that work as well. And when we're looking at 500 plus submissions, it's a lot. And we continue to evolve and change. We do have some additional changes that we're looking at this year. This is our 18th year, and really the ENnies haven't changed much in that 18 years, but the world has. Technology has gotten where it is, and we want to make sure that our voting systems continue to be fair. Right now, it's a one person, one vote through an IP system, and it's a Canadian runoff. I don't know the official name. That it's not a. It's not
first past the post.
It's not. Yes. Yes. Exactly. To provide some fairness there as well. So we want to make sure that we're continuing to do that, and to ensure, the fans and the publishers that we are, impartial. We don't have a hand in any of this. It is truly the fans that are making these decisions and are, supporting the folks out there that are providing their entertainment.
And the best we can do is just make sure that the list, the nominations that we give them are a fair and accurate representation of the best work that was submitted for the year.
And that is a massive responsibility on your shoulders. At least I felt that way.
I definitely agree. It's not something that I expected signing up for the position, but having gone through it for the year and seeing all the different things, I really feel like, and during my elevator pitch for judgeship again this year, I really emphasized that, because it is, and people get very passionate about this hobby, right? And so when you have gone through and said, I have the authority to judge these products, right? That is, you're representing the interests of 80,000 people at this convention this weekend. So that is a lot of responsibility, and those 80,000 people don't all look like me, right? They don't all think like me, and so it's very important that I am doing my best to represent them as much as I can.
Well, and it's not just the 80,000 here, it's anyone all across the world that follows RPGs and wants to make sure that the ENnies are doing their job.
My favorite part of the year was always the day after the nominations were announced, because there's always a lot of wailing. There's always a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth. But if you get past that and you go to the smaller publishers and the artists and the writers and whatever, and see, my God, I got nominated for something. There was one year when I did it where it was a small little book. It wasn't Product of the Year or whatever. But the guy had wrote on his blog about how, his family used to give him grief when he was a kid about role-playing games and everything else, and that he had gotten this nomination, and his parents were thrilled for him that he had gotten this nomination. And so it sort of validated all of those years of anguish, and the geek shame and everything else was washed away, at least for a moment, with the nomination.
Definitely.
Well, I think we're going to get a little grim and perilous, as I do have our big winners of the year. Gentlemen, if you want to come up on stage, we'll get you mic'd up, and we'll talk a little bit about Zweihander. Thank you. Thank you.
Should I bring the...
Absolutely, please, let's display it. We are live. We are on the front page of Twitch.
Love it.
This is Brian. Brian's going to give you guys a mic here.
Yes.
How are you? It's good to
Good,
see
how are
again.
you doing? It's you too.
Daniel. Nice to meet you.
I forgot I'm attached.
We
I'll let you, once you're mic'd, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. But these are the Game of the Year and Product of the Year gold winners for the ENnies. Oh, bring them up.
I didn't want them to clack against...
Oh, we'll just set them on the table. You can show them. Absolutely. These, the gold and silver winners get these medallions. They're made for us by Campaign Coins, and they're beautiful. They're very heavy.
Yes,
a lot of
they
bling,
are.
as Kat mentioned earlier. The Ken Hite wearing his giant bling. You could hear him coming from anywhere. The year
clank,
that Dracula dossier won a bunch of awards. So have you gotten any sleep?
No. So this of course is our first Gen Con, so it's kind of special in many ways. First, we didn't know what we were getting into. we gamed Thursday night, because we do a Thursday night game every week with our playtesters. At 11:30 at night, we get the YouTube video up, and we're like, how do we get up on Podbean? And then, of course, we're up all night at my house with anxiety. My wife is like, "You guys gotta go to sleep. You can't stay up. You're not gonna be able to. You're not gonna survive." So we drove out here Friday from Kansas City, 7.5 hours.
Wow.
We cut it down to about 7 hours because I drive kind of fast.
I understand that.
But it's been kind of kind of crazy, as I'm sure you can imagine. How long have you both been coming to Gen Con for?
This is my 18th.
Oh
No,
my
it's my
gosh.
17th Gen Con. My
Yeah.
first one was the last one in Milwaukee.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I on and off, but I started when the Midwest Express Center opened in Milwaukee, which was about 3 years before it moved to Indy. So a long time.
Very
Long
cool.
time. So, gentlemen, introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about why you're here.
Certainly. So my name is Daniel Fox, and this is Adam Rose.
Hi.
We're at the Grim and Perilous Studios. We're literally two nerds who did an RPG. We started the game probably about 6 years ago, and the best way to kind of look at what we were doing is we're like, what if you took the old world setting away from the mechanics of Warhammer Fantasy? And a lot of that conversation started because I've been running my own homebrew campaign for many, many years, and I had been a fan of Warhammer, but I never was a fan of the world, but I love the mechanics. So that's where we kind of got the start. We're like, well, how can we transition this into my own home campaign world? And then how can we make it to where it's set up to where it's completely world agnostic? So as an example, you could use it in my home setting, The Witcher, Black Company, all these amazing grim, dark fantasy worlds. And it just seemed like that area within the RPG space was not well defined. So that's kind of where Zweihander had started and what I guess brings us here. This amazing, amazing opportunity now.
So, well, let's talk about that. So, what did the ENnies mean to you when you got the nominations?
Well, we didn't even consider. We were like, should we get a Gen Con this year? And we're like, oh, no, we'll just skip over it because once again, I was always a basement gamer. So I never gamed at stores, never been to any conventions. This is the first convention I've ever been to. And when we found out the nomination, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a real thing. Our little RPG we created is suddenly now recognized. And I was like, well, this is super flattering. And then I was talking to my wife about this, and I was like, so should I go? And she's like, absolutely, you need to go, right? She's like, this is like a big deal. So we came without any expectation of winning anything. I mean, it's an honor to be recognized for creating something. I think any creator can identify with that, no matter how small or large the award is. And I have to be straightforward. I didn't even know what the ENnies were until up to that. So, of course, I did my research, and I was like, okay, so this is interesting. Because I look back at the history of the ENnies, and I'm like, okay, so we have Dungeons and Dragons, Tales from the Loop, and all these amazing RPGs that preceded it. So it's like, this is a big deal. So, of course, as I have understood the OSR community, these things are important to them because not only it's not necessarily about sales, which is about recognition for good work. And I was the first thing I did, I started crying when I found out. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. So no, it's amazing. And we came here with no expectations. We honestly didn't. We were like, oh, we'll go and shake some hands and network a little bit and get to know people who are in the industry and talk to people who run the ENnies and thank the judges for considering us. And now we're sitting here and we're just completely blown away and operating on no hours worth of sleep, right?
Well, for me, one of our playtesters is extremely emphatic about Gen Con. Always comes home and talks about it for weeks on end, and is a very intoxicating person when she talks about it. So I was very excited to finally come, and I'm a little bit more of a Pollyanna in comparison to, well, no, Pollyanna is the wrong way to say it, but a hopeful optimistic. And so I was like, yeah, I think we may have a chance of getting to silver in one of them. And so, yeah, this was absolutely shocking. I as well did research once we found out, and I knew that there were awards ceremonies, but I kind of was under the impression that there were multiple, like, you know, award ceremonies, and I found out, okay, so this is the one that's like the one to shoot for, like the top one. So I was very excited once we found out that we were even in the running and under consideration.
Yeah, I think when we came to the point where we're like, should we submit for the ENnies? And this is, of course, you know, earlier back in the year. The artist for the company, Dan Bandic, he and our layout artist, Malaya Lakasevich, they both live in Serbia.
Okay.
And in the book, if you don't know anything about Zweihander, it's like 688 pages. It's huge, and
Full of illustrations.
yeah,
Yes,
and
it is.
they're
It's its
over-
own weapon.
Yeah, exactly. And there were 500 amazing illustrations, and they're all done by the same artist, by Dayan. And he and Milena labored at this thing for 4 months to like make it look the way that it does. And beyond that, we had our editor, Matthew Pook, who many people probably know as Pookie. He does a ton of work. He's worked on Cthulhu. He's worked on Blood and the Chocolate, and many different products. So I felt that I as a creator needed to do what was good for all the creative work that went into bringing this thing to life, because it wasn't just about like my home brew in the basement. It was like our thing, and it was everybody else, all these, you know, the unsung heroes, you know, editors, you know, of the industry. So I was like, we'll submit it and we'll see what happens, and now it's like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible. So it's an honor to be here.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing up that point, because, you know, as companies are thinking about, well, do we submit the products? It's you got to remember the credits page.
Right.
Because and that's what we're trying, as the ENnies are trying very hard to do, is to bring it down to the individual. And, you know, we list on the nominations, here were the creators, here are the authors for the writing. We're trying to even incorporate that even more. The award ceremony, we list off, we don't list everybody's name. We'd still be there. But we at least display them on the screen, and they're there, because that is what this is about. It's about the individual contributors, because games are great. They're great books. The publishers have their name on them, and we couldn't do it without them. But there's a lot of people behind those, and those are the folks that blood, sweat, and tears, and the late nights up after the kids go to bed, and you know, that kind of thing. And that's what we're also trying to encourage. So I appreciate that you recognize that.
Yeah, it's important. I see, you know, of course, being my first ENnies, I was like, oh my gosh, or like, and from that perspective, I was like, there are so many people who go into like creating this thing. Like you have, if you think about it in the sense of like a band, you have like a band leader. He or she or whoever it may be, or a group of people are the writers. But it's all everybody else behind that brings that into focus.
Right.
And in my mind, like, oh, this is an amazing honor. Like, these belong to the people who help kind of bring this to life. It's not just mine, it's all of ours. And it's just overwhelming to be here, and I wish they could all attend, but everybody lives across the world, so we're the only ones in the United States, so here we are.
Exactly. Well, and we had, you know, Reese was from Australia this year,
Yeah.
so and it was nice that he could come, but once he knew that he really wanted to be here to experience the award show, and we have a little over 300 attendees that come to the award show, and we're very proud of the attendance at the award show, because it is very much about the creators and their family and the publishers getting out there and just, you know what, celebrating how awesome this industry is and the people in it. That's just a little token of thank you and recognition.
Without a doubt. And I think it's also interesting to note too that, like, as I'm sure any creator can attest, like, it's not just late nights, it's like when you have to, like, where you fit that time in with your family. And the family, like my wife Allison and my son Jack, he's 2 years old, and God bless her. I started this before he was born, you know, when she was pregnant. So, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't thank her too, because she has been my very supportive and very patient with me. I mean, when we started this, we had no expectation of bringing it to print. We're like, we'll make this cool thing, and maybe we'll do a couple things at Kinko's, and then it starts getting larger and bigger, and it's like, maybe we have something here. And then we're like, well, now we'll bring it to Kickstarter, and maybe we'll raise some money, and we can share our game with other people. And then, you know, we start with like $7,000. That's the magic number. We'll get 100 book sales, and that's a win. And then turn, you know, 30 days later, we're at $62,000. And then turn to 8 months later, we're at $123,000 with post backing. And now, a little over a year later, we're at somewhere around over 62,000 PDFs in the wild, over 24,000 hardbacks, both print on demand and actual limited edition books out there. And now we're preparing for our next Kickstarter, and we're like, okay, this is really real now. Like we have an obligation not only to for ourselves to continue producing, but also to the people who invested in us and believed that this thing is cool for us too. It isn't just like this thing that we were doing, but that they have ownership in it as well.
I'd like to speak on that. You said the people who invest in us, and we had an amazing moment where somebody had recognized Daniel and came up to us and was like, "Oh, by the way, I was one of your Spy Hunter backers, the top tier backers," and that was really amazing to meet one of those backers.
One of our big stretch goals was we get 5 people can get 5 books and a Zweihander sword. So we had 5 of them produced. So I knew the guys at Cold Steel. And was like, look, I'm doing this Kickstarter, and I just put a feeler out. I was like, I don't think anyone's going to buy these, but how much would it cost to do this? And so we're like, we'll eat the cost so we can make it kind of fun and kind of quirky. Right. And we ran into Paul, and
yes.
And he's like, I know you, and I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. You as a creator, you oftentimes live behind a pixelated veil.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. You utilize social channels, web forums to raise awareness. And oftentimes, I think that things can get misconstrued within that medium. So I think it's always interesting and important to meet other creators, which is always really cool too. Because we met a lot of people here. People I have backed and supported, and books that I own, and these people that I admire as
Right.
these kind of my North Star is these creators. And I'm like, this is inspiring to meet these people and shake their hand. And it doesn't take an award to do that. I don't think I ran into anyone this weekend who was like, we're not going to have a conversation. Who are you? It was every creator, because they understand. They're in the same position that we have been, that other creators have been, like yourselves. They all just want to share and have fun and play games. And
Right.
It's amazing that we can turn this hobby into something that's not only just an expression of design and creative, but it's also something we can share and we can enjoy. And ultimately, it's we're ultimately monetizing our hobby,
Right.
which is kind of crazy to think about, especially being new to Gen Con. I heard earlier in the talk it's 80,000 attendees. You mentioned
Something
that
around
before.
that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. It's incredible. Not only from just a monetization perspective, but also from an actual sheer amount of foot traffic, plus their families and their children, and these gamers being brought into the fold to learn about these things.
On that, so the 80,000, our community, at least from a lot of perceptions in reality, is that, we're, at least back in the 80s when I was growing up, it was outcasts, that were
Right.
playing these games. And so then now to see this to where there are 80,000 people here who come from that background, there's a lot of polite people here too,
Yeah.
who are genuinely thankful that there are other people who want to interact with them as well. That's overwhelming in and of itself.
Well, the fact that, the gaming industry in general, when you mentioned Tales from the Loop, kind of the big winner last year, well, and then you look at, the pop culture that is coming, the surgence of that, and when D&D is mentioned in things like X-Files and The Simpsons,
Yes,
and
certainly.
And role-playing is kind of hit pop culture, and Stranger Things. It
Yeah.
made it cool to do what I did when I was a kid.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about from that perspective, because I think that and maybe it's just my perception, but there has always been this kind of social stigma over gaming.
Sure.
And now we live in a time where, Wizards of the Coast is partnering with people who we well know from television shows and movies that we like, who've been gamers their entire lives. And now they're coming to the forefront. And I think that's interesting because we're now in a time where we're attracting people who are outside in the periphery of the industry,
Right.
and able to say, look, it's cool to be a gamer. It's not a bad thing. Don't be ashamed of it. Not only that, bring people into the fold, teach people how to play games. I mean, it's one of the most fundamental things we are as human beings is like we are a collective. And playing, everybody plays pretend when they're a kid. And now we're playing these complex games of pretend together and like teaching people, like, you can continue doing this. It's not dorky. It's fun. You'll love it. And teach your family and your friends and all these amazing people who come together to do this.
Well, and it's funny because I know being a woman in the industry, you know, people say, you know, oh, we need more representation. And this year we had an amazing amount of representation at the ENnies, and we continue to have that. I mean, it's wonderful thing. But something that I remind people is like, girls are role playing when they're playing Barbies. If they're a Barbie loving girl or dolls, that's what it is. Don't forget, it's more of a social aspect of the role playing as opposed to maybe cops and robbers.
Right.
But there's also a cross mix. I always did it all. But I had a little sister that did pretty much whatever I wanted to do. So,
so I'm sure you're familiar with Freaks and Geeks. So
Absolutely. Yep.
James Franco's character. So when I was growing up, I lived in Oak Grove, Missouri. This tiny it was a truck stop town in the middle of Missouri, outside of Kansas City. And we had two girls who played with us. One was a cheerleader, and one was like somebody we skateboarded with. So it was like we had this kind of like mix of people, and like everyone's like, when Freaks and Geeks came out many years later, they're like, oh my God, like she was the girl, she was our James Franco. But it's interesting. I reconnected with her on Facebook about 4 months ago. She lives in Florida. She lives down there with her family, and she still games.
Brilliant.
So it's amazing to see that kind of where we were then versus now. But I think to your point about like representation, it's certainly important, and I agree with you. I think that I kind of heard some online chatter about like they didn't feel the ENnies were well represented, but I disagree with that because you see the people on stage, the people presenting, the people who won. It almost feels like a form of erasure, like when you have Chris Spivey for Harlem Unbound, like literally one of my favorite RPGs I bought this year. So incredible, and then hear people say that it seems so disingenuous, or perhaps they're just not paying attention, or maybe they're just trying to rabble-rouse. But
yeah, I know that there was something that there was a lot of talk because we didn't have a woman on the panel, the judging panel this year, but there has been a woman on the judging panel every year before this because it was me. But we had Denise Robinson this year, and then I did it for several years. And I intentionally, the last couple I did it was because I was the only woman that had run, and I know that we try to get the word out there, but it's all self-nominated, and I get it. It is a lot of work, and people have lives when you're a judge, so you have to think about those things as well. We've partnered with Contessa and Stacy Delafano, and they actually promoted being a judge, and we've already talked about what we can do next year to even get the word out more, to try to get a broader range of individuals, that want to be part of the judge. And that's why Brian here, we talked about it toward the beginning of the show, of what it means to be a judge. And it's such a rewarding thing, and it's such a positive thing. There's nothing better than going up to someone that you've nominated and say, we loved your product, congratulations, it's deserved.
yeah.
So so you talked about your Kickstarter. Next, is it going to be a Zweihander 2, or is it something different?
Zweihander 2 Electric Boogaloo.
That's right.
Yeah, Turbo and Ozone will be making an appearance. There'll be a dance number. No, it's actually not
Sweet.
true. That's right. I was
Soundtrack?
I was a break dancer when I was a kid, so I'm like, no. So we've been working on a book kind of in secret. Zweihander, if you know anything about it, it's huge. I mean, if you've seen it, it's
we have it in
huge.
our booth, and people pick. And that's the other thing is the foot traffic for the book itself. Starting Thursday when the doors open, that Blades in the Dark and Happiest Apocalypse and Harlem Unbound, because we display all the nominees in our booth for the weekend. And that was when people because they have electronic versions of it, but they wanted to put their hands on it.
Yeah, we were unfortunately, it was a little too narrow of a timing for us to actually get a booth in stock. But to answer your question, we had a lot of material we had to leave behind.
Yes.
Like things that Adam and our playtesters, and when I use the term playtesters, I mean literally the guys we've been gaming with for the past like 7 years that we still play every Thursday. So we had a lot of things left behind, and we're like, we can't. If we put it into this book, it's going to be completely unwieldy. It'll exceed 900 pages. And once again, God bless my editor, Matthew Pook. He was like, remove this. You can't do it. And then Adam's like, you need to remove that which has not been well play tested. So we made a decision, like, let's pull these 150 pages out and just leave it on the table. So we began envisioning, well, we got this thing, but it doesn't have a theme yet. So our co-writer, Tanner, he was like, what if we follow this idea of like a left-handed path, like the things that we couldn't do, the things that are less along the lines of a little bit more morally gray, even more so. So we called that basically as a slush pile in our Google Drive, because we use Google Drive, as I'm sure a lot of collaborators do. And we called that folder main gouge. Like, and I'm butchering the word purposefully because that's what we do. It's kind of it's our brand to butcher the language. But main gouge is what we called that, so it was kind of the left-handed path. So we decided to start creating new professions. We put in some vehicle combat. We started polishing up the things that we left behind, and we wanted to make certain that, one, it wasn't a splat book. 2, it fit within the system, and 3, it added something that was actually provided real, true value that didn't feel just simply additive, like as a money grab. So we started polishing that up, and now we are, I think, T-minus 8 days from our next Kickstarter.
I don't know the exact days, but it's very close.
Adam is the one who's going to tell me, okay, we're a go,
Yeah.
we can do it.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at now, and we've talked a little bit about it with some people here, but we're really looking forward to it. We will be interested to see what sort of support it has. I mean, I can say that the nomination itself has certainly, my website went down twice because the amount of traffic.
I was going to ask you about that, is what the
Yeah.
impact of the nomination had for you on your product.
Oh gosh, it's been kind of crazy. So I have a background in advertising, and I spent many years in analytics. So like I very pedantically, I'm like watching my sales, and I can track when there's like spikes and dips. And there's been it's a massive spike. It's a 3,800% spike just after leading up to this, which is overwhelming. Like I didn't expect that at all. But we've gotten a lot of new people joining our Facebook page, a lot of people interacting with us, and I have a very hands-on approach. I talk to everyone who emails me. I have a tendency to give away the PDF for free because I just want people to play,
that's what
right?
you've been doing all
It's like-
weekend here. Is if you're here, you see Dan, he'll give you a free PDF.
Yeah, we even, and I was mentioning earlier, we couldn't get stock, so I was like, let's just give away 5,000 PDFs on a business card, and maybe people will use it and play it, and we didn't care about the money. We're just like, let's just get people playing this game and sharing it and talking about it, because we want to continue producing, and who knows, one day we could do this full time, but for now it's it's long nights like you mentioned. It's late in the evenings on the weekend. Sometimes it's squeezing time into work. Don't tell my boss I said that. But it's had a tremendous impact on it's certainly motivated both of us
Right.
more. The entire team for that matter.
Yeah, with main gouge, or mangouche, I think it's pronounced.
En français.
Yeah, we often are butchering the words behind it, and sometimes when you pronounce it correctly, people assume other things. So I took 4 years of German in high school, and so every time I mention Spy Hunter, people are like, "Oh, you mean that old Nintendo and arcade game? Yeah, I loved Spy Hunter." Okay.
No, not quite.
Okay, Americans would pronounce it Zweihander.
Because that's and it's funny. My husband speaks German a little bit, and he had to remind me because I was doing the same thing. Because when you read it, that's the way it looks.
yeah,
When you look at it.
absolutely.
And he's
Yeah.
like, no, it means it's two-handed. It's German.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, ein, zwei.
Yeah. Yeah, I think to that point, it's like the brands. It's kind of like how Warhammer poked fun at the German language. We're like, there's something here, so let's it's Zweihander, as we say in Missouri, with the drawl. But no, it kind of became the brand behind it, and Main Gouge is an extension of that, and we're certainly excited to create that thing. We're hoping we bring it back to Gen Con next year and maybe submit it to the ENnies. We'll see what happens.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, I know that we're very close to our time here, so thank you everyone that watched. Thank you, gentlemen,
Thank you.
for joining
Thank you
us, and
both.
Brian. Congratulations on your win and another year of strained eyes and late nights. For just as a final reminder, the ENnies submissions are open now for anything that was published between May 1st of this year and the end of April next year. And I hope everyone comes and checks out the ENnies. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.